or reach out to Paul. I'm sorry. Chris, you want to go get us started?
Sure. Can we have a call to order and an approval of the minutes from August 11th of 2022?
Yeah. Someone needs to move to pass the minutes.
I make a motion to pass the minutes, to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
3 of you.
Good.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay, I guess we can move on then to our third quarter investment performance review. Excellent.
Yes. Good morning. As we open up the page 1.1 in your report, it is the main screen of all the indexes. And as you can see, I'm sure you're all aware that we had another quarter of extreme volatility. July and August actually were positive numbers, and then it just fell apart toward the end of August through September to bring a quarter together again from domestic equity really across the board. Domestic equity, international equity, you can see the Russell 3000 index, what we use in your benchmark, is the second index there. For the quarter, it was negative 4.46, bringing the year to date to a negative 24.62. And significantly affecting the 1 year number now, negative 17.63 for the Russell 3000 index. In the international equity space, we use the third one down, the Morgan Stanley All Country World ex-US. And that came in for the quarter very volatile once again, negative 9.91%, year to date, negative 26.5%, and then on the 1 year number, negative 25.17%. Also bringing, affecting the overall international equity, the 3 year numbers down to negative 1.52% on the 3 year number there. And then once again, fixed income actually, had the most volatility for the quarter and for year to date. Very strong negative numbers. You can see the Bloomberg Barclays Ag coming in at a negative 4.75 for the quarter and negative 14.61 for the year to date. And 1 year number negative 14.6. So once again, tremendous amount of volatility in the fixed income markets. Obviously, with the Fed continuing to raise rates, that's going to continue that volatility to a significant level. As we jump down to the next section, GDP did come out positive for the third quarter, about 2.6% estimates, and then we'll redirect into a final number. But it looks like it's definitely positive for the third quarter. May go to a little bit less than 2.6, but it probably it's definitely going to stay in that positive range. Which was good. It's coming off 2 quarters in a row of negative numbers. Second quarter was just slightly negative. The GDP is negative 0.6, but the first quarter was 1.6 negative in the first quarter. So we had that downturn in GDP. Now we're almost waiting to see how some of the numbers play out. For instance, right now, obviously inflation is a big topic. And you can see in June, it was at a high of 9.1%. It has come down. September readings were about 8.2. But those numbers are still significantly higher than what the average was over the last 20 years, where it was averaging in the 2% range pretty consistently. So we're still seeing very great numbers there that are high, but the Fed adjustment rates are starting to make some headway with inflation. But when you dig a little deeper into inflation and you take the core inflation rate, which excludes low-power food and energy out of it, it's at a 40-year high. In September, it came in about 6.6%. The chart down in the bottom corner kind of shows you those two flows. So as you can see, overall CPI is starting to come down off its highs. The core CPI is still climbing at this point, or at least coming into the high level of 6.6. So there's still what I would call a lot of hand twisting over that, and where the effect is going to go. Right now, the Fed raised in November and looks to raise most likely another 75 basis points in November, and looks to raise another 75 in December, is what most projections are and how much the experts feel. So really, in the last 2 quarters, if they made that increase, that'll be a 3% increase over the last 6 months. Is the Fed has made adjustments to the Fed rate. But back to what I had mentioned about some of the numbers that are still mixed, or looking to see how they start to fall out. Unemployment is a great example right now. It is still at an all-time high rate at 3.5%. So a very strong, solid number from an unemployment standpoint. With that, though, we're still having the issue of the low labor force participation, and also basically an aging demographic. So that continues to keep upward pressure on wages, which contributes to the higher heightened inflation. So there's those type of issues that are kind of still twisting things for where the Fed would like to try to get to from an inflationary rate standpoint. The one area that we've seen, the Fed rate definitely adjust and was expected is the housing market. Now August marked the 7th month straight that it's been declining. Interest rates now for mortgages are up on a 16-year high, about 6.81%. So that's all for the Fed adjustment. It's slowing down the housing market significantly. But with that, like I said, there's still some things from a manufacturing end, and I'm flipping to the next page, 1.3. The chart up top. This is kind of where we believe we're going to start seeing unemployment start to rise in the near future.
1.3, excuse me. Sorry, you said 1.3?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm doing off of 2 different pages.
I could do the left, the previous page. One prior. I think it's
one more prior. Oh, yeah,
You're going the wrong way.
Yeah, you're going wrong. One more. Right there. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry.
It's 2. This is 2.2.
I apologize. So on this chart, the blue line represents manufacturing, the yellow service. 50 is the key marker. Above 50 is growth mode, and below 50 is traction. You can see now that it's manufacturing is significantly coming down off of its high, and looks like it's going to dip below 50. So this is where we believe we're going to start seeing over the next 6 months, most likely some layoffs coming, and unemployment rates may adjust. And a great example is when the interest rates go to the levels they are now, areas like where I call it the toy end of things, but boats, RVs, things like that people would typically were buying when interest rates were below 3%, and they could buy those type of toys. Those things are going to go away first. So what happens from a manufacturing end? When those industries start to see that they're not going to have demand, they're going to start to cut the labor forces. So it's a lot of manufacturing areas like that will most likely start to see some adjustments. What will be interesting though is to see, because there's still such a demand for jobs across the board, is will some of these layoffs just roll into other positions being filled? Will we see the unemployment rate really adjust that much? That'll be some of the interesting things to come out of this. But we do feel that we're going to start seeing some of those areas slow down. Housing market will be just another example. There's going to be less demand for that new house, from that standpoint. So we start to see some adjustments.
What does IT fit in? Because I'm hearing about it on Twitter and that laid out a lot of people.
Right. And that's like another area to see where they're going to Apple, like another thing standpoint coming forward, because there's still such a demand in certain areas of IT, from a retail standpoint. Apple's great example. Phones, all those types of things. A lot of that, a lot of the trip prevention is actually done, internationally. But that's kind of what I meant about we'll see what it lays out here. These just a couple of tech companies that are, actually getting ahead of the curve, or just going through a new dynamic of kind of cutting back on what they may have overstaffed in the first place. So those are some of the things that play out and see what it plays out. And that's what I meant about. Now, are we just going to see job shifting, or is there going to be true, layoff and increase at a point? And that's what we're looking for, because everything is kind of leaning toward, what all the experts are leaning and pointing toward is mild recessionary type of situation, and that looks like that's what we're going to go into 2023 with. What we're also looking at is, will the Fed hold up as after December's rate increase? Will come to a stop, and they kind of let them settle and see where it's at. Because that's a crucial thing for fixed income going forward, is if we can get the Fed rate that, feels and looks like they're gonna stop and not increasing, then we'll start to see fixed income be able to kind of turn over and adjust to the rates and actually start to see not only returns, but actually, stronger returns relative to what the last 10 years have been. Start bringing in, 2 or 3% type of return, but it will take, several months after things have settled down, it doesn't look like that's going to adjust. And one of the concerns here is, and I wouldn't call it a concern, but also how to look at it is the Fed may very well, there's a lot of economists are predicting that the Fed may very well start to adjust the rate downward by the end of 2023 if the recession looks like it's going to go stronger or past kind of the mild definition. Yeah. So that could also throw fixed income into the too. From that standpoint, that rate, obviously, fixed income kind of bases itself off, seems to stability and less. It's what allows them to kind of operate in stronger returns over time. So with that is that's where some of the concerns are. But that's what when you saw it on the key factor. That's where waiting to see how that plays out. Is it going to be? Will there be somewhat of like what I call panic? Will you see a lot of mass layoffs everywhere? Or is it going to be more targeted in areas such as manufacturing, certain areas will slow down first, where demand will start to low. And it will be next quarter, probably going into the first quarter before we see those numbers and results. But that, and the one positive service looks like it's starting, level off where we're on that 57 area. And the good thing about that is service is about 8% of our production. Manufacturing reps, it's about 20%. So with that, but flowing through there, and then just a couple of things to point out on the next page, 2.4. As to be expected, the PE ratios for domestic equity are looking quite attractive now. The dotted lines are the 5-year averages. You can see both small cap and large cap, yellow being large and blue being the small cap. Those the PE ratios are significantly below the average. And if you flip to the next page, international is showing a very similar story at the bottom of 2.5. Both those numbers are significantly below. And then just back to the interest rates and where the yield curve is on page 2.6. You can see on the short end, the interest rates are actually higher than the 30-year market. And that's a significant issue. That once the Fed rate holds up and stops increasing, it'll take some time, but that should revert. We should see. You always want to see the longer end interest rate being higher than the long. And right now we're in the worst. So with that, that kind of covers where we're at from the standpoint of the markets. On page 2.8, we're neutral from an equity standpoint. We do still feel that as when the equity markets start to turn, that we'll see more positive area in mid cap and small cap versus your large cap as we start to turn out of this. But we look at this fourth quarter being pretty much no better than what we've seen over the last 3 quarters. Internationally, similar areas as far as we pulled back. We're more cautious overall with the international equities, and it stems from everything that's been with the Ukraine, with the war going on in Ukraine, and then all the stresses on oil prices there. It's just causing such a havoc for the European markets. But once again, we believe once it starts to turn, it will be a positive area. But overall, developed markets are the only word around the city we're neutral, and we even call it not really much better than slightly vaguer than we term it around, like to call it cautionary from that standpoint. Fixed income is still the same outlook as far as duration is the issue that's more concerning, and credit sensitive is the only area for these value rate.
Why is that?
Same thing as that rate, Fed rate, is to keep adjusting it. It's hurting the long-term duration.
Right, but I think why is credit sensitive more favorable than the other fixed income categories?
Because typically, it's not tied they're not doing what government bonds are doing, so they're, you know, using from a credit sensitive area, there's usually a little bit of a better rate.
I just wanted, because if concerned about inflation, I would think that credit sensitive would be more effective. I'm thinking of high yield bonds, you know,
Right.
more marginal type of bond issuers.
Well, when we look at credit sensitive, we look at the whole.
Okay.
You know, from all credit sensitivity, so we look at high yield to, you know, just corporate bonds and nothing to fall into the high yield. It's still, it's the area that will have a little bit more of a better adjustment. Like I said, the duration side of things is just going to be okay until the Fed stops raising rates. It's no different than when they lower it all the way down to zero. It's the same kind of, it's the same different issues, but it's the same issue. When they start moving that Fed rate, it creates problems for duration. With that, we can go into the next tab and look at your portfolio. And overall, you can see for the quarter, we tightened up compared to the last couple of quarters, but we still have some underperformance overall in quarterly basis. You can see for the police plan, negative 5.7 versus the benchmark at negative 5.13. Overall, bringing year to date where we're still trailing, and that's been in the last couple of quarters, we trailed each quarter. As I said, on a quarterly basis, we did tighten up compared to the first and second quarter underperformance. Overall, it brings the 1 year number in where we got showing a slight underperformance of 16.75 versus 16.36. But once again, as I always, you know, the long term is really the key to what we're looking at. And when you look out to your 3 and 5 year numbers, you see significant outperformance on the other side of this. The 3.37 versus 2.74 for the 3 year, 4.58 versus 4.02 for the 5 year number. And since inception, going back to 2003, you can see 6.64 versus the benchmark at 6.19. And overall, when we moved our discretionary, which is back in November of 2015, you can see that return being a positive outperformance of 5.65 versus 5.35. But yeah, the last 9 months, they're kind of, you know, they took away the positivity of 2021 for sure. You know, from that standpoint, it's kind of probably back down. But overall, that's another thing. When you look at things, 19, 20, and 21 were all very strong years. So that's what's also allowing overall to hold up your 5 year numbers and your longer numbers. You know, you want to see that longer number over 7 in these types of situations, which is severe as it's been this year. It's, you know, still positive to see how close you are to 7 long term. All the other plans really represent similar performance because they're all lined up, you know, in very similar allocations. Well, it is the same allocation all the way across the board. So with that, we can flip into the next page. Okay, it's allocated the same way. A little bit, and that's why it actually performs slightly different. Yeah, because OPEB really doesn't have any of the alternatives on such a small one. Right. So that's the difference, yes. So with that, overall performance wise, domestic equity, you can see as the total domestic equity slightly underperformed versus the Russell 3000 at negative 5.1 versus negative 1.46. Within that, we did have, you know, several managers, you know, better than their benchmarks and a couple underperformed. Vaughan Nelson's a good example of, you know, they were right on the benchmark, but Nuance All Cap did struggle for the quarter. They were down significantly compared to the benchmark. Dropping into international equity, same thing here. Find a couple of managers doing well and a couple struggling. But overall, you can see slight underperformance on the equity side, negative 10.23 versus negative 9.91 for the benchmark. With that, you flip to the next page. Fixed income was reversed, protected quite well in the fixed income area. Negative 3.70 versus the benchmark at negative 4.75. And obviously, you know, I'm well aware that, you know, all those protection, we're still experiencing negative numbers across the board in all those areas. With that, let's look down a couple more pages. 4.7. Yeah, great years. So overall, when we look at the quarter, what did that negative return mean to you on a real dollar standpoint? for the police plan of a loss of negative 3.6 million, bringing down the market value as of 9/30 to 62,348,000 plan. The next page gets to allocation. So across the board, you can see from an allocation standpoint, domestic equity, the light blue being the target and the dark blue being the actual allocation. See that we're just slightly overweighted, 39.9 versus 39 for the target. In international, we're still underweighted a good bit, 18.1 versus the target of 21. And overall fixed income, about just almost 3% underweighted there. And within that, where we make that up is across the board around private equity, private debt, and real assets. A couple of the allocation moves we made through the quarter were basically we reduced the commodities allocation and moved those assets into fixed income and a little bit into international, but we're still underweighted. That main move came from commodities are a very volatile area, and at the beginning of the year, when we increased your allocation last year, we saw coming forward that there was good potential for to see increases, and we saw that the first 4 or 5 months of the year, and then it started to turn, got very volatile, started turning negative. So we felt like the benefit we got out of the first 5 months of the year wasn't really happening with the second half of the year, so we reduced it back in August and put that allocation through more into international and into the fixed income, as I said. Now, this is all small percentages, but it does make a difference from an allocation standpoint. And and we're not taking commodities totally out. Like we appreciate the fact that it is volatile right now, but there's still an outlook that it can add benefits down the road. So we're moving it all together, and we have to pop it back in later to make a whole lot of sense. But we want to move the allocation down to a level we felt was detrimental to the overall plan.
Harry, quick question.
Sure.
I wasn't here for that allocation shift. Was that the first one this year that we made, or were there anything else given there?
Well, in the beginning of the year, we actually increased it. Right there in 2021, beginning of the first quarter of 2022, we actually increased a little bit. So that we made that allocation change in August where we reduced it. And what we had done early on in the year too, starting back in the April, May timeframe, we had reduced some of the equity allocation to actually cash. So in the August, September timeframe, we reduced a little bit of that cash allocation. If you look, you're still cash allocation wise, you're still about a percentage point higher than we typically do. We usually be right around 2. We had, I'd say at the end of May, we had jumped about 6, and we brought that back in. The other thing we did is we removed the exposure to mortgage-backed securities in the portfolio, and we did that September 1st. And we just spread that allocation we removed from mortgage-backed securities to exposure in your core plus the active managers of the portfolio. We do believe when it settles down and the Fed stops, increases the rate, then, like I said, fixed income will benefit. We think core areas will be mortgage-backed securities for the housing market. It just makes sense right now. I'll stay away from that class.
Hey Perry, can you explain the rationale behind increasing international exposure? I know valuation is probably what you're going to say, that they're cheap and they've underperformed for a long time, but is there not a dynamic going on globally where you have a bifurcation? China makes up China and its allies make up a very large portion of international, and Europe is in probably a very deep economic recession. As we shift more and more towards kind of onshoring our global supply chains, I think that that's probably going to continue after election results are in, that we'll see more and more of a drive to onshore some of this instead of outsourcing it to international markets. I'm just kind of curious as to what the right weight allocation is in international. It's clearly been the major underperformer for the last 5 years. And a lot of that's on the strength of the dollar. The dollar's been very strong, and it's hard for the international perform, but just kind of your overall thinking as to that international exposure.
The increase was just a slight increase. It was about 0.5%. And if you look, we're still significantly underweighted, about 3% underweighted to our target. And basically everything you mentioned is why we're still, significantly underweighted. So really it was just an evaluation look, and a look of what from the assets we were freeing up, moving a slight bit to international, basically. And it's, it is based on the evaluation and more of the longer term side of this, where we think it will be 5 years from now as opposed to, short term. But more like the now time frame. Because you're right. But also, and then keep in mind, we are in that allocation, inside of your international allocation is about there's a target of roughly 6% to emerging markets, and we're significantly underweight there. From an emerging market standpoint, we're about half of that. As that slight increase that we made to international, think of like 17.5 to about 18.1, roughly, was just a slight gauge, and it was basically on evaluation or anything else.
Okay.
But everything you hit on, like I said, is why we're still underweight and why we're underweight in emerging markets. Because we see that to be the most volatile area. And actually, I didn't mention earlier, but that was the most volatile area internationally over the last 6 months, 9 months, really. For the quarter, it was on the underperformance of emerging markets was significant. So with that, Andrew, we go more toward the back. Keep it. It's almost to the back. Right here. So the attribution, this is for the quarter. The column over to the right shows the allocation is basically where the value add was to the portfolio. Manager had a slight, manager with a slight negative for value add, and then the other section is.
Can we just? I'm trying to catch up. 9.4. Yeah, sorry. Okay, good. Okay.
So this attribution just measures where the value is. Okay, so the value add was really the allocation of the adjustments we made through the third quarter. Managerial value add was slightly negative to the portfolio. So and then the other category and why it's a little large for this quarter is whenever other category kind of captures everything going on. So anything that does not fall in their manager and asset allocation school, we're making trades and adjustment the allocation. You'll see it kind of increase on the short term of the quarter. And as you look out the longer term, it's usually always the lower area. It's just basically measuring when trades are going in and out if it affects the portfolio.
Manager value added is what you repeat that in.
That would be how the managers did compared to their own benchmarks. So whether they had the value. So several managers that underperformed. Unfortunately, what happens to managers that outperform, slightly, and then the managers that underperform or had significant underperformance, unfortunately, 2-3% of underperformance. So overall, did not add value to the standpoint of the action attraction of the performance. If you flip to the next page, it goes through 1 year, so you see how others starts to shrink down as it spreads out over the time frame. But once again, asset allocation was the key benefit and value add. the manager value, the manager ad is where that's pulled back. And then the 3-year number is on the next page. And you know, it shows a little more of where, so the value add was still asset allocation is still the stronger side of it. The managers over the 3-year time frame did add value to the portfolio. And the other section, once again, like I said, it gets smaller. It's on 0.16 this one compared to 1.27 for the quarter as far as the measurement. Like I said, over time it spreads out. But overall, allocation is the key. And we're very big believers on that. You know, especially when it comes to active management in the equity area. Domestic equity is a great example. Domestic equity, large cap. It's extremely hard for those active managers to outperform. So as you know, it's so just as hard to find the right manager to do that outperformance.
Hey Perry, if you go back on one slide there to the 1 year, the manager value added, you know, most of that is the international negative. Is that how much of that can be attributed to that one manager who had the Russian exposure and basically had to write off a huge part of their portfolio?
I'm going to have to get you that answer, Chris. I would think it's a significant piece of it, but I would rather check with my team to make sure I have the right answer.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty significant. I thought they underperformed by
they did
several hundred base. I mean, quite a big number.
Might have been 400 or 500 basis points.
Yeah.
On that time frame. So I believe that is a majority of the underperformance, but I'll just double check with my team and shoot you an email.
Okay.
So yeah, but that is definitely it. We had a manager there that got hit hard, and there were 2 other ones that didn't do as poorly, but didn't do definitely had significant underperformance.
Yeah.
Standpoint. But with that, and that's why throughout time with us, if you notice, we are always making slight adjustments to allocations, and that's what we're always that's what we focus on. We believe that's where we can add the most value. In both your international and your domestic equity areas, they're predominantly, well, domestic equity for sure is predominantly passive. The managers in the active space are a smaller percentage of the overall. International is close to 50-50. As far as within that, typically we can find managers in the international space that can do better over time. Right now, we do have one that is, has really taken on the chin. Overall, we have still confidence in their long-term approach. They just haven't really got to the last
I just think, that I just keep coming back to, I mean, it's kind of what I do professionally and personally. And I think the risk level on the international side of the business has been greatly elevated from a political risk situation. Basically this manager had, I can't remember the numbers, but 30% or so in Russia and basically had to value that to zero. With what's happening in China and Taiwan, nobody really knows. We could wake up one morning and the US says we're no longer allowing, chips to be sold to China of any type. They've already eliminated artificial intelligence chips to be sold to China. There's a lot of political risk, I think, much more than there has been in the last 2 decades in that international space. So
we agree without a doubt. And the Russian-Ukraine issues, an ultimate wild card too for how long this, how far it will go.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole other concern. There's no doubt about it. We've done some conference speaking engagements recently, and that's been those have been the 2 messages. The international is definitely a concern. That's why we're underweighted. I'll talk to my committee, see what they're doing there for but everything I've seen, we're going to stay underweighted. Whether we do some type of reversal in the future as far as cutting back a little bit more on international, I'm not sure I see that coming, but I will ask about it, Chris.
Okay. Paul has a question, I think.
No, I just wanted to let you know that I would join the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
So at this point, that's basically all I have for you. If you have any other questions.
I have a general question. When you guys first came on and took over the investments, I wasn't part of that, but as we're talking about target allocation and you shipping things, you know, with a lot of clients, is that done across, I guess, like that's specific, it's not specific to Mount Lebanon's plans, but you like bucket different of your pension plans and I guess considering like the duration of the liabilities, or is it across all the plans, target allocation? That makes sense.
Yes, it's by allocation. You know, so if you're overall a 60% equity target, 40% fixed income, those targets will be within that.
And how do you determine like the 60-40 versus 70-30 for?
So or 65-35, those two things. That's all based on individual plans and what their flows are, what the what the funding status is, you know, all those types of things go into that play as to whether we advise one plan to be a 65-35 or 60. I have a strange, unique little pension plan. I mean, it's a small one for a small borough where they're actually overfunded. It's like the only thing they got going for the area, and they're the rust out there, that economic area, they're spending much more money, but their pension plan is overfunded by a good 20%. So their allocations pretty conservative because all we're trying to keep them running into is future on the run. Is their manager approach it very simply because that's probably the one thing we can afford. It's like actually have to part of the pension plan. That's how bad they were. It's remarkable because typically that's where you find the most underfunded plan. Is the most economically crappy situation in general. I'll in for that salary or that. But this one is it's definitely unusual. With that being said, for instance,
yeah. Along those lines, and this might be a question for you, with the poor asset returns and like, all the interest rate liabilities fixed at 8% of 7%. So is there a view on where do we know how these will return?
large effects.
Just even going in
This is even more here, right? 24. Let's see 24. It's going to come off for 2022. That's the unfortunate. They're going to come off of the 1/1/23. Interesting. Enough, this could have been an odd year number. Like this underperformance, like the performance we've had in the state of the number, given all through 2023, it might not be the same as depending on the 2024.
Yeah, you see sometimes in the legislature and stuff where they allow you to go off of a different number if it's really that bad. But we're not going to. So we have our actuary evaluation report. Every odd year is a state reporting year. So 1/1/23 will be our next one. Based on that snapshot in time, we have a smoothing of a 4-year smoothing with it, but we'll have a big shot in the arm of having to increase the funding due to the losses we have.
So through calendar year 2023, we're still looking back to 21, 20. Okay, correct. Yes, I forgot about that.
And so at some point that discussion will be had to start setting aside money now. We have reserves to do it now. Don't wait until current year budgets affect current service levels. Don't affect them in 24. Start planning for it now. That's where we've done that historically here. So if it's better, great. It goes right back in the general fund. But if you need it, it's there.
I've got a question on like when you at what point do you change manager for the asset manager that you hire for one couple been having below benchmark returns and I know you need to you shouldn't just look at 40, you need to look at past performance. You got 3 to 5 year numbers too.
It's always constantly evaluated. It's much more on where the 3, 5, 7, 10 numbers are, and then it's always within the manager itself. Meaning, is there any major changes? They lost their CIO. They had other changes to portfolio. have they had any philosophy changes? Are they straying from what their style is? Those are the types of things that are leaders on placement, as opposed to performance we've seen over the last 9 months. But I will also tell you that several of those managers that have significantly underperformed are on are either on watch or very close to being put on watch performance. So it's always continuously evaluated. But yes, as the overall management of it, you try not to have a knee-jerk reaction and say, okay, 3 quarters in a row, yes, it's a bad performance, but there's there are definitely some reasons why personnel on the one. Kane Anderson is the one manager that had more allocated to Russia and got more inside the portfolio. So with that, those are the things that are evaluated and looked at. But and it's hard because when you look at Kane in your portfolio, you don't see the long-term numbers because we just added them in 2020. In 2021, actually, we added them in May of 2021. So their longer-term numbers overall are still good at the benchmarks. But it's just good to go within the benchmarks. They've obviously the performance was significant from that.
I think more like the investment approach doesn't seem to match your expectations going forward. I mean, their style, their style just doesn't seem to align well with where you think the economy is going.
Well, like if you look at it too, they're about 9% portfolio, or 0.9% portfolio. They're less than 1%.
So you're talking about
I'm talking about that specific manager that has done it before.
Okay. Well, I was thinking like Nuance did with bad quarter, and Champlain's with bad or below benchmark. And Champlain's like just their attributes. They're more, I think, large cap than mid cap.
It's a mid to large cap type of portfolio. Applies.
Yeah.
From that end, like I said, they're constantly, our team is definitely looking at the quarter. They're looking to talk. There's not a major change. Stay with it. And I would say there would be more likely, if anything, they would shift where they reduce the active manager and increase the pass.
Yeah.
There's more what you can see most likely before you see the manager replacement. Barring, like I said, it's more that when there's staff change, style drift, as example, those are the things that concern us to make more immediate changes as opposed to, really take no longer look.
Yeah.
Anything else? Unfortunately, we don't know what this will take us into the points. So
we still count. We still count.
Yeah, we have no idea. Really, it's been another messy situation. But I think to Chris's point, the global international concerns are probably really large.
I missed the AFC election, but how did the results that we've seen so far match your expectations?
From our political consultants that we interact with, they were kind of vague at best to kind of give a bill. So we don't really, we're still waiting to see how that works. I mean, typically historically, the markets tend to view when Republican, the Republican Party is in control, they view it to be better for economy situations. So often just the market jump, but it's such a crapshoot. It really the last 8 years, crapshoot. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's interesting. George Washington's making more and more sense. He wrote quite a few papers on he didn't agree with the two-party system. I thought today would be more. It's past Pennsylvania senator election would be a great example of one, which was the third one. It's from that, it is what it is. Let's see how that plays. I think what we see more than anything else since COVID began. So really, we look at it as both parties just started printing money. And there's been no stop to it. And that's a key to inflation. It's just like economics 101. You print it, inflation goes up. And if you look at it from a perfect storm, if you take on all the labor issues that came out. You know, we were already looking at baby boomers being a big issue, big change. So when COVID comes along, they just basically kicked that in big time. Because I think a lot of people said, no, stop, walk it out. Markets were up, they retired off of a good number, and they walked away. So that increases more. Yeah. I do a lot of trade unions too, and you know, they've been for 20 years now running around scrambling because there's been really the last 20 to 30 years been such a push that everybody goes to college. You know, they've been recruiting and pushing for a long time, but this past 10 years, it's been harder because baby boom retirement city because a lot of those guys will retire like 50s. You know, so
Their hands won't work, their knees don't work.
right, exactly. So I know
We have it here.
well, that big picture, definitely all of that works in because a lot of my kids' friends, you know, my kids are between 19 and 24. When they were approaching college and not sure what they wanted to do, I'd say, well, you like working your hands, you should look for the trades. And I'd say, by the way, save your rear end off. Your body will tell you that you're done before the rest of you does. But you know, like if you can do that, you can find a lot of personal, you know, but that is a reality.
Have the trade union been recruiting? I mean, actually recruiting?
Yes, yeah, very yeah. If you ever notice, you'll hear them advertise higher paying, that type of stuff here in like locals and stuff.
Yeah.
But like for instance, the carpenters is a big client of mine. You know, they're looking at all kinds of different things. They're looking at allowing retired guys to come back to work. Like they were looking at how that would work, and they're, you know, like they were making those type of adjustments. Because the other issue is just like everything else, right? If you look at trade unions, their most experienced guys are that's good. So a lot of general contractors don't want to lose them. You know, but everybody is in the same type of that. That's the labor squeeze. It's the perfect number. And every time you look at those the labor shortage reports, it basically shows a big number of shortage of labor and across the board. So it's rather interesting. That's why it's going to be interesting to see how, if we start having some layoffs, how much is that really affect? And again, I'm almost, you know, wondering how many people decide, yeah, so I'll go on and see what happens, or how many people will say, oh, maybe we'll put it, you know, my brother-in-law got laid off in his long time ago, so he started his own business. Like say, he's one of those people who fell into a category for a while, then became unemployed because he was split off his after store, you know, so it's, I think a lot of that, yeah, so the way I call it is you collect your unemployment when you figure out what you're doing. That, yes, you are definitely part of this business, for lack of a better way to put it. Anyway, that's.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Okay. Any new business to report?
Yeah, I did want to report on one thing. So at Tuesday night's commission meeting, so last night's commission meeting, if you want to tune in or go take a look at it, they're moving forward with a finalized plan of consolidating the advisory boards into 5 boards. It's a nice presentation that Assistant Manager McBean's put on, so it's probably worthwhile just go take a look if you're interested in it. How it affects this board is it's going to be consolidated into a finance committee type board. So it's going to be a financial advisory board that will have still a pension component to it. And how that all works out, we'll have to design that. And how term limits for what you're currently doing under the pension board and how if they're going to make you reapply, so on and so forth. That's all to be figured out. It's not set in stone yet. But the ordinance will be drafted and before the commission, most likely in early January, with implementation by Q1 or Q2 2024. So that's coming, and that it will affect this board and be consolidated into that finance advisory. I don't even know what I'm calling it yet, but it's not familiar to me as that. I'm surprised we've never had just a dedicated finance board in the municipality. What it looks like here may be different than others. A lot of times these finance boards, in my, just talking with other colleagues, really focus on the budget. We have a good defined process for it. This finance board will not go into the budget. That's not what they're there for. We have that process defined and it's done well. So things that have been mentioned, obviously pension will be in there, fleet may be in there with, say again?
What's fleet?
So all of our vehicles.
Okay.
So as we move forward into EV, into how to finance that, how do we move forward with the infrastructure and those types of things? So that may be one. Financing facilities in the future. Possibly looking at utilities. It could be a whole bunch of things that we have in this community, industry experts that may be interested in doing that and helping out on that end. Because ultimately, number one, I don't have that expertise. That's not what I do every day. But two, sometimes I don't even have the time. So a lot of these, the one thing they did discuss last night that I thought was interesting was it will be about a 9-person board, which will be nice to have a pocket that can be, you know, pension specific. So those that are interested in pension, but still could then contribute to other areas that it need focus. So those are just ideas on other things that are available, and it could become more and more as we go forward. Hopefully not too much, but so that is just so you know, that's coming, and you will see that how that affects you. You will be, the pension board will be consolidated. So got a lot of work to do to get there, but
what's the motivation for the change?
we have 11 advisory boards.
Okay.
Way too many, and one of the common complaints we have from advisory board members who are fantastic. You guys are fantastic. Being here, in fact, you're sitting on this call at 9:45 in the morning, it tells you everything you need to know. Is not necessarily like this board, but the parks board doesn't know what the sports board's doing, and vice versa. Or, hey, I'm an industry expert here that can help here.
Yeah.
Or, hey, this program, you know, and so parks and rec are a good one. The economic development, parking and transit. So like mobility, cartway, sidewalks, those types of things, moving them all together. So you get those together in the same room as opposed to one board does it independently. And it not only the right hand and left hand know what they're doing, talking about, it also gives the ability for the commission to assign tasks to one body, as opposed to, well, this is more of a parks element, and this is more of a sports element, you know, sports advisory and all the leagues element. Well, they can work together on one focused field issue, right? Well, how does fields affect parks, and how does parks affect fields? So that's always used as the common example, whereas here it's been split for years. Maybe it's so. That's really, it will not touch any of the mandated boards. So planning board, zoning board, library board, those aren't full. It's just those advisory, pure advisory boards that we created, commissions created over the years. And it still does not prohibit creating an ad hoc board at any. So if a specific issue comes up for studying something, or a specific issue comes up in the future, you know, who knew about EVs 20 years ago, right? They could have an EV, you know, environmental sustainability board didn't exist 20 years ago. You know, they can create that ad hoc or as a permanent board in the future, does not prohibit them from doing it. So just wanted to make sure that you see communications from me or see it publicized that is coming.
You said 11 down.
Maybe 5. And the focus of those boards is changing, right? So some of them, for instance, one would be more about mobility. It's not just about traffic, right? It's about all the other things, whether it's what do you do with the cargo, you know, those types of things, as opposed to just cars. It's not all about cars. So, folks.
They identified the 5. Yeah. Okay.
And that's in that presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, they're actually, yeah. There you go. This is where they were meeting about it. So you can't see this obviously at home or in your place there, but so.
Which one would be pension?
This is just one of the boards. I believe this is the one that's combining for mobility, transportation, connectivity, and access.
Okay.
Would be a board, but that's what they're focusing on. So that's the combination of parking, traffic,
Okay.
and the economic development.
How do we access meeting?
It's online on Malibu.org.
Okay.
Meeting videos. And
Yeah.
it's all in there. There's also going to be the ability, depending on what your interests are, of possibly going to a different. Right? If you wanted to, hey, that's more interesting to me than, you know, the finance board. You'll have that opportunity to apply and be favorable to the fact that you're still interested in serving.
Can't imagine anything more interesting than the finance board.
I can, not having one, but no, it's a good thing. It will be a good thing.
This goes into effect in January
2024.
2024.
2024.
Okay, so we'll still meet again then for
We'll be together for 20.
Listen, if anybody leaves the board, I don't want you to write down, we are tired of listening to Terry talk.
Yeah.
The reason.
All right.
Okay.
If there's no new business, then a motion to adjourn the meeting for today.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Great. Move then. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Harry, you take care of yourself.
Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. See you
Thanks.
later.
Thank you.